attention to that man behind the curtain. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
The shit's chess, it ain't checkers.
So I strongly suggest that you wake the up.
There's a battle going on right now, a battle to define everything that happens on the internet in terms of traditional things that the law understands. Is sharing a video on BitTorrent like shoplifting from a movie store? Or is it like loaning a videotape to a friend? Is reloading a web page over and over again like a peaceful virtual sit-in? Or a violent smashing of shop windows? Is the freedom to connect like freedom of speech? Or like the freedom to murder?
Today, we remember the pioneering computer programmer, cyber activist, social justice activist, Aaron Swartz. At the age of 14, he helped develop RSS, revolutionizing how people use the internet. By the time he was 19, he co-owned Reddit, now one of the world's most popular sites. He was also a key architect of Creative Commons. Aaron Swartz is now dead at the age of 26. On Friday, he killed himself just weeks before the start of a controversial trial. He was facing up to 35 years in prison for downloading millions of academic articles at MIT. His parents say decisions made by prosecutors in MIT contributed to his death. Today, we'll hear Aaron Swartz in his own words.
If we lost the ability to communicate with each other over the internet, it would be a change to the Bill of Rights, the freedoms guaranteed in our Constitution, the freedoms our country had been built on, would be suddenly deleted. New technology, instead of bringing us greater freedom, would have snuffed out fundamental rights we'd always taken for granted.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We spend today's broadcast remembering the life and work of cyber activist, computer programmer, social justice activist, and writer Aaron Swartz. At the age of 14, he co-developed the Really Simple Syndication, or RSS, web protocol, the key component of much of the web's entire publishing infrastructure. By the time he was 19, he co-founded a company that would merge with Reddit, now one of the world's most popular sites. He also helped develop the architecture for the Creative Commons licensing system and built the online architecture for the Open Library. Aaron Swartz committed suicide on Friday. He hanged himself in his Brooklyn apartment. He was 26 years old. His death occurred just weeks before he was to go on trial for using computers at MIT, that's the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, to download millions of copyrighted academic articles from JSTOR, a subscription database of scholarly papers. JSTOR declined to press charges, but prosecutors moved the case forward. Aaron Swartz faced up to 35 years in prison and $1 million in fines for allegedly violating the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. When the case first came to light, the United States Attorney for the District of Massachusetts, Carmen Ortiz, said, quote, "Stealing is stealing, whether you use a computer command or a crowbar and whether you take documents, data, or dollars." In a statement, Swartz's family criticized federal prosecutors pursuing the case against him. They said, quote, "Aaron's death is not simply a personal tragedy. It's the product of a criminal justice system rife with intimidation and prosecutorial overreach. Decisions made by officials in the Massachusetts U.S. Attorney's Office and at MIT contributed to his death," they said. Aaron Swartz was a longtime champion of an open internet. Last year, he helped organize a grassroots movement to defeat a House bill called SOPA, the Stop Online Piracy Act, and a Senate bill called PIPA, the Protect IP Act. During a speech he delivered last May in Washington, D.C., he explained the challenges he saw the internet facing.
There's a battle going on right now, a battle to define everything that happens on the internet in terms of traditional things that the law understands. Is sharing a video on BitTorrent like shoplifting from a movie store? Or is it like loaning a videotape to a friend? Is reloading a web page over and over again like a peaceful virtual sit-in? Or a violent smashing of shop windows? Is the freedom to connect like freedom of speech? Or like the freedom to murder?
Later in the broadcast, we'll play that full speech. That was Aaron Swartz speaking in May of last year. Well, he took his own life on Friday. A funeral will be held in Chicago on Tuesday. For more, we now go to Cambridge, Massachusetts, to Harvard Kennedy School of Government to speak with Harvard Law School professor Lawrence Lessig, the director of the Edmund J. Safra Center for Ethics at Harvard. He knew Aaron for 12 years. He was a friend and mentor. Lawrence Lessig is a founding board member of Creative Commons. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Professor Lessig. Tell us about Aaron.
Well, thank you, Amy, for having me here to talk about this incredible soul. I think the thing to remember about Aaron is that from the youngest age, from the age of 12, his work was dedicated solely to making the world a better place for the ideas that he had. He started with the idea that maybe we needed to make the internet easier to share information. So that's what led to RSS. And then with Creative Commons, it was how do we license people to make the freedom to share legally protected? And then after that, it was with the public library, how do we make books available? And when that wasn't enough, he started pushing in the social activist and progressive space, first with working with Stephanie Taylor and Adam Green at the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, and then with his own Demand Progress with David Siegel. In all of these areas, what he was doing was advancing ideals. He was an idealist who believed we had to live up to something better. And he was an incredible soul who inspired millions who now weep, as we've seen across the internet in outrage and devastation that he would have been driven to the cliff that he stepped over. And the federal government, remember at the time there was the Bradley Manning and the WikiLeaks issue going on. The federal government thought it was really important to make an example. And so they brought this incredibly ridiculous prosecution that had multiple, I think it was something like more than a dozen counts claiming felony violations against Aaron, threatening, scores of years in prison. But, it's not the theoretical claims about what he might have gotten. It was the practical burden that for the last 2 years, his wealth was bled dry as he had to negotiate to try to finally settle this matter. Because the government was not going to stop before he admitted that he was a felon, which I think, in a world where the architects of the financial crisis dine regularly at the White House, it's ridiculous to think Aaron Swartz was a felon.
What about Aaron's state of mind? How he kept up his spirits, especially during this very, very difficult time, also struggling with depression?
Yeah, Aaron was depressed. He was rationally depressed. He was losing everything because his government was overreaching in the most ridiculous way to persecute him, not just because of this, because of what he had done before, liberating government documents that were supposed to be in the public domain. Of course he was depressed. He wasn't depressed because he had no loving parents. He did have loving parents who did everything they could for him, or because he didn't have loving friends. Every time you saw Aaron, he was surrounded by 5 or 10 different people who loved and respected and worked with him. He was depressed because he was increasingly recognizing that the idealism he brought to this fight maybe wasn't enough. When he saw all of his wealth gone, and he recognized his parents were going to have to mortgage their house so he could afford a lawyer to fight a government that treated him as if he were 9/11 terrorists, as if what he was doing was threatening the infrastructure of the United States. When he saw that and he recognized how incredibly difficult that fight was going to be, of course he was depressed. Now, I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't know whether there was something wrong with him because of, beyond the rational reason he had to be depressed. But I don't have patience for people who want to say, oh, this was just a crazy person. This was just a person with a psychological problem who killed himself. No. This was somebody who was pushed to the edge by what I think of as a kind of bullying by our government, a bullying by our government. And just as we hold people responsible when their bullying leads to tragedy, I hope Carmen Ortiz does what MIT did.
The U.S. attorney.
The U.S. attorney. And lead an investigation. Ask somebody independent to look at what happened here and explain to America, is this what the United States government is?
So for me, it all started with a phone call. It was September, not last year, but the year before that, September 2010. And I got a phone call from my friend Peter. Aaron, he said, there's an amazing bill that you have to take a look at. What is it? I said. It's called COICA, the Combating Online Infringement and Counterfeiting Act. Oh, Peter, I said, I don't care about copyright law. Maybe you're right, maybe Hollywood is right, but either way, what's the big deal? I'm not going to waste my life fighting over a little issue like copyright. Healthcare, financial reform, those are the issues that I work on. Not something obscure like copyright law. I could hear Peter grumbling in the background. Look, I don't have time to argue with you, he said, but it doesn't matter for right now, because this isn't a bill about copyright. It's not? No, he said, it's a bill about the freedom to connect. Now I was listening. Peter explained what you've all probably long since learned, that this bill would let the government devise a list of websites that Americans weren't allowed to visit. On the next day, I came up with lots of ways to try to explain this to people. I said it was a great firewall of America. I said it was an internet blacklist. I said it was online censorship. But I think it's worth taking a step back, putting aside all the rhetoric, and just thinking for a moment about how radical this bill really was. Sure, there are lots of times when the government makes rules about speech. If you slander a private figure, if you buy a television ad that lies to people, if you have a wild party that plays booming music all night, in all these cases, the government can come stop you. But this was something radically different. It wasn't that the government went to people and asked them to take down particular material that was illegal. It shut down whole websites. Essentially, it stopped Americans from communicating entirely with certain groups. There's nothing really like it in U.S. law. If you play loud music all night, the government doesn't slap you with an order requiring you be mute for the next couple weeks. They don't say nobody can make any more noise inside your house. There's a specific complaint, which they ask you to specifically remedy, and then your life goes on. The closest example I could find was a case where the government was at war with an adult bookstore. The place kept selling pornography, the government kept getting the porn declared illegal, and then frustrated, they decided to shut the whole bookstore down. But even that was eventually declared unconstitutional, a violation of the First Amendment. So, you might say, surely COICA would get declared unconstitutional as well. But I knew that the Supreme Court had a blind spot around the First Amendment, more than anything else, more than slander or libel, more than pornography, more even than child pornography. Their blind spot was copyright. When it came to copyright, it was like the part of the justices' brains shut off, and they just totally forgot about the First Amendment. You got the sense that deep down, they didn't even think the First Amendment applied when copyright was at issue. Which means that if you did want to censor the internet, if you wanted to come up with some way that the government could shut down access to particular websites, this bill might be the only way to do it. If it was about pornography, it probably would get overturned by the courts, just like the adult bookstore case. But if you claimed it was about copyright, it might just sneak through. And that was especially terrifying because, as you know, copyright is everywhere. If you want to shut down WikiLeaks, it's a bit of a stretch to claim that you're doing it because they have too much pornography. But it's not hard at all to claim that WikiLeaks is violating copyright. Because everything is copyrighted. The speech, the thing I'm giving right now, these words are copyrighted. And it's so easy to accidentally copy something. So easy, in fact, that the leading Republican supporter of COICA, Orrin Hatch, had illegally copied a bunch of code into his own Senate website. So if even Orrin Hatch's Senate website was found to be violating copyright law, what's the chance that they wouldn't find something they could pin on any of us? What's the chance that they wouldn't find something they could pin on any of us?
What do you want us to do?
Say hell no, motherfuckers! But you can sleep when you're dead. Right now,